Maya Rodriguez had always been different from the other artists who rented studio space at the Riverside Arts Complex. While they wore paint-splattered aprons and discussed color theory over expensive lattes, she worked quietly in the corner unit, her sleeves rolled down despite the sweltering summer heat. The intricate tattoos that covered her arms told stories most people would never guess, and she preferred to keep it that way. The art complex had been her sanctuary for 2 years now. After leaving the military, she struggled to find her place in civilian life. The transition wasn't easy for anyone, but for someone with her background, it felt like learning to breathe underwater. Art became her lifeline. The studio gave her purpose, a place where she could channel everything she couldn't say into sculptures that spoke volumes. Her work was raw and powerful, twisted metal figures that seemed to emerge from pain and transform into something beautiful. Gallery owners had started taking notice, but Maya kept a low profile. She paid her rent on time, minded her own business, and tried to blend into the background of the bustling creative community. That peaceful existence shattered on a humid Tuesday morning in July, when the Hartwell twins moved into the studio next door. Connor and Blake Hartwell came from money, the kind of wealth that bought you into art schools and guaranteed gallery showings regardless of talent. They were known around the city's art scene for their collaborative installations, though most people whispered that their trust fund did more heavy lifting than their actual artistic ability. They were used to getting what they wanted, when they wanted it, and they had their sights set on Maya's corner studio. The corner unit was special. It had the best natural light, the most space, and a small outdoor area perfect for larger installations. Maya had gotten it through sheer luck when the previous tenant left suddenly, but the twins had been eyeing it for months. They assumed that a quiet woman working alone would be easy to intimidate into giving up the prime real estate. Their campaign started small, loud music during Maya's usual working hours, accidental deliveries that blocked her parking space, conversations just loud enough for her to overhear about how some people didn't really deserve premium studio space. They would smirk when they saw her, making comments about her appearance that they thought were clever. Maya ignored it all. She had dealt with far worse than two spoiled rich kids playing games. She put in her headphones, focused on her work, and tried to maintain the peace she had worked so hard to build. But the twins weren't content with subtle harassment. They wanted her gone, and they were willing to escalate to get their way. The first real confrontation happened on a Thursday evening. Maya was working late, as she often did, when she heard voices outside her studio. Through the window, she could see Connor and Blake with two other men she didn't recognize. They were pointing at her space and talking in animated whispers. 20 minutes later, someone tried the handle of her door. It was locked, but the attempt was deliberate and aggressive. Maya watched through the peephole as Blake stepped back and nodded to one of the unknown men. She recognized the type immediately hired muscle, probably from one of the clubs downtown. Maya's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the familiar surge of adrenaline she remembered from another life. She had two choices: call the police and hope they arrived in time, or handle this herself. The old Maya, the one who had earned her place among the most elite warriors in the world, wouldn't have hesitated. But that wasn't her life anymore. She was supposed to be just an artist now. The men left after testing her door twice more, but Maya knew this was just the beginning. The twins had crossed a line by bringing outside muscle into what should have been a simple rental dispute. They had no idea who they were messing with, but Maya was determined to keep it that way. The next morning brought a new level of harassment. Maya arrived to find her outdoor workspace trashed. Her metal scraps were scattered, her welding equipment had been tampered with, and someone had spray-painted crude comments about her tattoos on the wall. The message was clear: leave or things would get worse. The other artists in the complex started to take notice. Some offered quiet words of support, but most kept their distance. Nobody wanted to get caught in the crossfire of what was becoming an ugly situation. The complex's management company seemed conveniently unavailable whenever Maya called to report the incidents. Connor and Blake grew bolder. They would accidentally bump into her in the hallway, making comments about how people like her didn't belong in refined artistic spaces. They questioned her credentials, her right to be there, and made increasingly personal remarks about her appearance and background. Maya continued to work, but the tension was building. Every sound outside her door put her on edge. Every unexpected visitor made her muscles tense in ways she hadn't felt since leaving the service. The piece she had worked so hard to build was crumbling, and with it, the careful control she maintained over the parts of herself she kept locked away. The twins noticed her growing tension and mistook it for weakness. They began to time their harassment for when she seemed most vulnerable, pushing harder each time they thought they saw her crack. They brought friends to visit their studio, conveniently timing these social gatherings for when Maya was trying to work. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Maya was putting the finishing touches on a piece for an upcoming show when she heard a commotion outside. Through her window, she could see a small crowd gathered around the twins' studio. Music was blasting, and people were spilling into the courtyard that she technically shared with them. Someone knocked on her door. Maya looked through the peephole to see Blake standing there with a beer in his hand and a smug expression on his face. She didn't answer, but he knocked again, harder this time. "Hey, neighbor," Blake called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We're having a little party. You should come out and be social for once, maybe meet some real artists." Maya stayed silent, but she could hear laughter from the crowd. Blake knocked a third time, and when she didn't respond, he tried the handle. Finding it locked, he rattled it aggressively. "What's wrong? Too good to socialize with the rest of us?" Blake's voice carried a nasty edge now. "Or maybe you're hiding something in there. What kind of person locks themselves away from their neighbors?" The crowd outside grew quiet, sensing the shift in tone. Maya could see Connor joining his brother, and the two unknown men from earlier flanked them. The party atmosphere was evaporating, replaced by something uglier. "You know what I think?" Connor picked up where his brother left off. "I think some people get spaces they don't deserve. I think some people take opportunities away from those who have actually earned them." Maya's hands clenched into fists. She could feel the familiar sensation of her training taking over, her body automatically cataloging threats and calculating responses. But she forced herself to stay still, to breathe, to remember that she wasn't that person anymore. "Maybe if certain people weren't so antisocial, they'd realize they're not welcome here," Blake continued, his voice growing louder and more aggressive. "Maybe they'd do the right thing and find somewhere more appropriate." The crowd outside began to murmur uncomfortably. Even the twins' friends seemed to realize this had gone too far. But Connor and Blake were drunk on their own power, convinced they had Maya cornered. "You know what I heard?" Connor said, his voice taking on a mock conspiratorial tone. "I heard our mysterious neighbor has some interesting ink under those long sleeves. I heard she might have some stories she doesn't want to share." Maya's blood ran cold. Someone had been asking questions about her background. The twins hadn't just been harassing her randomly, they had been digging, trying to find ammunition to use against her. Blake stepped closer to her door. "What do you say, neighbor? Want to show everyone what you're hiding, or are you going to keep pretending to be something you're not?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya stared at the door, her reflection visible in the small mirror she kept near the entrance. For a moment, she saw both versions of herself, the quiet artist she had tried to become and the warrior she had never stopped being. Outside, the twins were getting restless. Their friends were starting to leave, uncomfortable with the direction things had taken. But Connor and Blake seemed determined to push until something broke. "Last chance," Blake called out. "Come out and have an adult conversation, or we'll assume you're too scared to face your neighbors." Maya walked to her tool bench and picked up a small metal sculpture she had been working on. It was a phoenix rising from flames, still rough around the edges but clearly recognizable. She had intended it to represent her own transformation, her attempt to build something beautiful from the ashes of her military career. But as she held it in her hands, feeling its weight and the sharp edges where she hadn't yet smoothed the metal, Maya realized that sometimes transformation meant accepting all parts of yourself, not just the convenient ones. The knocking came again, harder and more aggressive. This time it was joined by the sound of someone testing the windows. Maya could hear Connor directing the two hired men to check for other ways into her studio. They had moved beyond harassment into something that looked a lot like breaking and entering. Maya set down the sculpture and walked to her phone, but something stopped her from dialing. These men didn't know what they were dealing with, but maybe it was time they learned. The twins had spent weeks trying to intimidate someone they saw as an easy target. They had brought muscle to threaten her, vandalized her workspace, and now they were attempting to force their way into her private studio. They thought they knew who Maya Rodriguez was based on her quiet demeanor and artistic pursuits. They were about to discover how wrong they could be. Maya walked to her storage closet and pulled out a small wooden box she kept on the highest shelf. Inside, wrapped in black cloth, were items she hadn't touched in 2 years. A knife that had never failed her. Tactical gloves worn smooth by years of training. A small metal object that most people wouldn't recognize, but that had saved her life more times than she could count. She held each item for a moment, feeling the weight of memories and the pull of old instincts. Then she carefully wrapped them back up and returned the box to its place. That wasn't who she was anymore, and she wouldn't let the twins drag her back to that darkness. But there were other ways to handle the situation. Ways that didn't involve violence but still made it clear that they had picked the wrong target. Maya walked to her computer and opened a file she had hoped never to access again. It contained documentation of her military service, commendations, and records that painted a picture of someone very different from the quiet artist the twins thought they were bullying. She printed several pages, including a photograph of herself in dress uniform that looked nothing like the woman in worn jeans and paint-stained shirts that Connor and Blake knew. Then she walked to her door and waited. The harassment outside was escalating. Someone had started banging on her windows, and she could hear Connor discussing whether they should just break something to force her to come out. The few remaining party guests were leaving quickly, not wanting to be associated with what was clearly becoming a criminal situation. Maya took a deep breath and made her decision. She unlocked her door and stepped outside for the first time since the harassment began. The sudden appearance of their target caught the twins off guard. They had been expecting her to cower inside or run away, not to confront them directly. Maya stood in her doorway, calm and composed, making eye contact with each person in the small group. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its low volume, "I think we need to have a conversation." Blake recovered first, his confidence bolstered by the presence of his hired muscle. "Look who finally decided to be social, ready to discuss your lease situation like an adult." Maya stepped fully outside and closed her door behind her. "Actually, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You seem to think you know who I am and what I'm capable of. I'd like to correct that impression." Connor laughed, but there was something uncertain in his eyes. Something about Maya's posture, the way she carried herself, had changed. She no longer looked like the quiet, intimidated artist they had been harassing. "Oh, this should be good," Connor said, trying to maintain his bravado. "What are you going to do, make us a sculpture?" Maya smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, I was thinking of telling you a story about a girl who grew up thinking art was everything until life taught her there were more important things. Things like protecting people who couldn't protect themselves." She held up the printed pages from her computer. "See, you've been asking questions about my background, about my tattoos, about why I keep to myself. I thought you might appreciate some answers." Blake snatched the papers from her hand, confident in his numerical advantage. But as he read, his expression began to change. Connor looked over his brother's shoulder, and Maya watched as the color drained from both their faces. The hired muscle stepped closer, but Maya didn't move. She just stood there, relaxed but ready, watching the twins process what they were reading. "This is fake," Blake said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is just some military fantasy you printed off the internet." Maya reached into her back pocket and pulled out a small military ID that she kept for emergencies. She handed it to Connor without breaking eye contact. "Lieutenant Commander Maya Rodriguez, United States Navy," she said quietly. "Navy SEAL Team 6, 3 tour in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq. Decorated for actions I'm not allowed to discuss, involved in operations you've never heard of, trained in methods that would give you nightmares." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the hired muscle seemed to reassess the situation, their tactical awareness finally kicking in as they recognized the subtle signs they should have noticed from the beginning. Maya continued, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. "I came here because I was tired of that life, tired of violence, tired of conflict, tired of being someone whose job was to hurt people. I wanted to create instead of destroy. I wanted peace." She looked directly at Blake, then Connor. "You took that away from me. Week after week, you pushed and prodded and tried to break something I was trying very hard to build. You brought criminals to my workplace. You vandalized my property. You attempted to break into my studio." Connor tried to speak, but Maya held up a hand. "I'm not finished. You see, the person you've been harassing doesn't exist anymore. You pushed her until she remembered who she used to be. And that person, gentlemen, is someone you really don't want to meet. Blake looked at the papers in his hand again, then at Maya's calm, controlled expression. You're threatening us. Maya laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Threatening you? No, I'm educating you. You want to know about my tattoos? They're not decorative. Each one represents something I survived, someone I saved, or someone I couldn't save. They're a map of places I've been and things I've done that would haunt your dreams. She pointed to a small tattoo visible on her wrist. This one is for my first kill. I was 22 years old, defending a village full of children from people who would have murdered them all. Maya rolled up her sleeves for the first time since moving to the complex, revealing intricate artwork that told stories of heroism and loss. This is for my team leader who died saving a school. This is for the hostages we rescued from a terrorist compound. This is for every mission where good people came home because someone like me was willing to do what others couldn't. The hired muscle were backing away slowly, recognizing a predator when they saw one. But the twins seemed frozen, caught between disbelief and growing terror. So here's what's going to happen, Maya continued, her voice still calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. You're going to leave me alone. You're going to stop harassing me, stop vandalizing my property, and stop bringing criminals to my workplace. You're going to pretend I don't exist, just like I've been pretending you don't exist. Connor found his voice. You can't threaten us. We'll call the police. We have witnesses. Maya looked around at the empty courtyard. The hired muscle had disappeared, and the last of the party guests were long gone. What witnesses? Your friends who were helping you commit crimes? The men you hired to intimidate me? Please make that call. Blake was staring at a commendation letter that detailed Maya's role in a classified operation. This says you saved 43 civilians. It says you single-handedly held off an enemy force until reinforcements arrived. That was a Tuesday, Maya said simply. Want to hear about what happened on Friday? The twins exchanged glances, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. They had spent weeks trying to intimidate someone who had faced down enemies that would terrify them beyond imagination. Maya stepped closer, and both men instinctively backed away. I came here for peace. I just wanted to make art and forget about the part of me that knows 100 ways to neutralize a threat without leaving evidence. But you couldn't let me have that, could you? She pulled out her phone and showed them a screen full of video files. Security cameras, gentlemen. I've been documenting your harassment campaign for weeks. Your attempts to break into my studio tonight are all recorded. So are the crimes committed by your hired friends. Connor's face went pale. What do you want? I want you to leave, tonight. Pack up your studio and find somewhere else to play artist. I want you to forget you ever met me, and I want you to pray I never have a reason to remember you exist. Blake looked at the papers again, then at his brother. We can't just... Our lease. Maya smiled that cold smile again. Your lease is the least of your problems. You see, I still have friends in very interesting places. People who investigate things like harassment, intimidation, and attempted breaking and entering. People who take a dim view of trust fund kids who think money makes them untouchable. She leaned closer, and both men could see something dangerous flickering behind her calm exterior. Or maybe you'd prefer to handle this the old-fashioned way? I'm rusty, but I remember enough to make it interesting. The twins looked at each other, then back at Maya. For the first time since their harassment campaign began, they were the ones who felt cornered and afraid. We'll go, Connor said quietly. We'll pack up tonight and leave. Maya nodded. Good choice. And gentlemen, if I ever see you again, if you ever come back here, if you ever think about bothering me or anyone else in this complex, well, let's just say my art isn't the only thing I'm good at creating. She turned to walk back to her studio, then paused. Oh, and you might want to check with your hired help. I took some pictures of them too. Might want to make sure they understand that their faces are now in a very permanent file. Maya walked back into her studio and closed the door, leaving the twins standing in the empty courtyard, holding evidence of exactly who they had been messing with. Through her window, she watched them stumble around their studio, throwing things into boxes with shaking hands. Within an hour, both twins were gone. Their studio stood empty, and Maya finally had the peace she had been seeking. But as she sat in her chair, looking at her hands that had held both weapons and art tools, she realized something had changed forever. The quiet artist Maya Rodriguez was gone, burned away by weeks of harassment and the need to protect herself. In her place stood someone new, someone who could create beautiful things, but who also remembered what it meant to be a protector. Maya looked at her phoenix sculpture, still unfinished on her workbench. She picked up her tools and began to work, smoothing the rough edges and adding details that spoke of fire and rebirth. But now she understood that sometimes you had to embrace your flames to become who you were meant to be. The twins had wanted to know who she really was. Now they knew, and they would never forget. Maya Rodriguez was not just an artist or just a warrior, she was both, and that combination made her more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. As she worked through the night, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years: perfect balance. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And if anyone else ever threatened that peace, they would discover just how far a seal would go to protect what mattered. 3 months had passed since the Hartwell twins fled the art complex, and Maya's life had settled into a rhythm she never thought possible. The other artists, who had once kept their distance during the harassment campaign, now sought her out for coffee and conversation. Word of what happened that night had spread through the community, though the details remained mysteriously vague. Maya preferred it that way. She had revealed enough of herself to solve the immediate problem, but she wasn't ready to become the complex's resident war hero. She still wore long sleeves, still worked quietly in her corner studio, but there was a new confidence in her bearing that others noticed and respected. Her art had evolved too. The pieces she created now carried a different energy, still raw and powerful, but infused with a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. Gallery owners who had shown mild interest were now calling regularly, and her first solo exhibition was scheduled for the following month. Everything seemed perfect until Detective Sarah Chen knocked on her studio door on a gray Tuesday morning in October. Maya knew Chen was law enforcement before she even opened the door. There was something unmistakable about the way cops carried themselves, a professional alertness that reminded her of her own military training. But Chen was different, smaller than most officers Maya had encountered, with an intelligent gaze that suggested she saw more than most people realized. "Ms. Rodriguez," Chen showed her badge through the window. "I'm Detective Chen, Metro Police. I was hoping we could talk for a few minutes." Maya opened the door cautiously. She had done nothing wrong, but her background made her naturally wary of unexpected visits from law enforcement. "What can I help you with, Detective?" Chen looked around the studio with genuine interest, her eyes lingering on Maya's latest sculpture, a piece that depicted a figure breaking free from chains made of thorns. "I'm investigating a series of incidents that occurred here a few months ago. Harassment, vandalism, possible attempted breaking and entering. The complex management finally filed a report." Maya gestured to a chair, though she remained standing herself. "I'm not sure what I can tell you that isn't already documented. I filed reports at the time, but nothing seemed to come of them." "That's part of the problem," Chen said, settling into the offered seat but keeping her posture alert. "The initial reports were mishandled by the responding officers. By the time someone with actual investigative skills got involved, the trail had gone cold." Maya studied the detective's face. "And now you're trying to warm it up." Chen nodded. "The Hartwell twins have been busy since they left here. Similar incidents at 3 other locations around the city. Art galleries, studios, even a small museum. Their pattern is always the same: identify someone they see as vulnerable, escalate harassment until the target leaves, then move in to claim whatever space or opportunity they wanted." Maya felt a familiar stirring of anger, but she kept her voice neutral. "Sounds like you have everything you need to make a case." "We do for the recent incidents," Chen agreed. "But the victims are too frightened to testify about anything serious. The twins have connections, expensive lawyers, and a habit of making problems disappear with money. We need someone willing to stand up to them in court." Maya walked to her workbench and picked up a small chisel, running her thumb along its edge. "And you think I'm that someone?" "I think you're the only person who ever made them back down," Chen said quietly. "The question is whether you're willing to finish what you started." Maya set down the chisel and turned to face the detective fully. "What exactly do you know about what happened here, Detective?" Chen pulled out a small notebook and flipped through several pages. "I know the twins spent weeks harassing you. I know they brought outside muscle to intimidate you. I know they attempted to force entry into your studio on July 27th. and I know that by morning they had packed up and disappeared. She looked up from her notes. What I don't know is how one artist managed to accomplish what 3 different security companies and 2 private investigators couldn't do, make the Hartwell twins afraid. Maya smiled slightly. Maybe they realized they were in the wrong. Or maybe they realized they were outmatched, Chen replied. I've seen their other victims, Ms. Rodriguez, young artists, elderly gallery owners, small business operators, people who couldn't fight back effectively. But you're different, aren't you? Maya studied the detective's face, looking for signs of how much she actually knew. Different how? Chen closed her notebook and leaned forward. I did some checking before I came here today. Maya Rodriguez, age 28, graduated from art school 3 years ago, no criminal record, model tenant, pays her taxes on time. Very ordinary, very unremarkable. She paused. Except for the part where you're a decorated Navy SEAL who served 3 combat tours and received commendations for classified operations. Maya felt the familiar tension of being discovered, but she forced herself to remain calm. My military service is public record, detective. What does that have to do with your investigation? It explains how you handled the twins, Chen said simply. It also explains why they've been staying as far away from this complex as possible. Word is they won't even drive down this street anymore. Maya walked to her window and looked out at the courtyard where the confrontation had taken place. I didn't hurt anyone, if that's what you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything, Chen replied. I'm stating facts. The twins had a pattern of escalating harassment that had worked for them multiple times. They brought muscle, they vandalized property, they attempted forced entry. Standard intimidation tactics that had succeeded everywhere else. Chen stood and joined Maya at the window. But here, something happened that changed their entire approach to problem solving. Instead of escalating further, they ran, and they've been running ever since. Maya turned to face the detective. What do you want from me, detective? I want you to testify about what happened here. Not just the harassment and vandalism, but how you made them stop. I want the court to understand that these men will continue hurting people until someone stands up to them effectively. Maya shook her head. I can't do that. Why not? Maya gestured around her studio. Because this is my life now. Art, peace, creating instead of destroying. I can't go back to being the person who solves problems with intimidation and fear. Chen studied her for a moment. Who says you'd be going back? Maybe you'd be moving forward to someone who protects people with more than just superior firepower. Maya was quiet for several minutes, considering the detective's words. Finally, she spoke. Tell me about the other victims. Chen pulled out her phone and scrolled through several photos. Maria Santos, 73 years old, runs a small gallery featuring local Hispanic artists. The twins wanted her space for a more sophisticated exhibition. Harassment lasted 6 months before she gave up and closed her doors. She swiped to the next photo. David Kim, 25, recent art school graduate. Twins wanted his studio because it had better lighting. They spread rumors about his work being derivative, got his gallery showing canceled, made it impossible for him to find buyers. He's working construction now to pay off his art school loans. Maya felt her jaw clench as Chen continued through the photos. Each victim had a story of dreams crushed, careers destroyed, lives derailed by 2 men who thought money and connections made them untouchable. The most recent victim is why I'm here today, Chen said, stopping on a photo of a young woman with paint-stained fingers and sad eyes. Rebecca Martinez, 19 years old, full scholarship to the City Arts program. The twins wanted the studio space her program had secured for student use. Maya looked more closely at the photo. She's just a kid. A kid whose scholarship got revoked when the twins spread rumors about her character and work ethic. A kid who's now working 3 jobs to try to afford community college instead of pursuing the art degree she earned through talent and hard work. Chen put away her phone. The twins have moved beyond simple harassment. They're destroying lives and they're getting better at it. More sophisticated, more careful about leaving evidence. But they always start the same way, testing their targets to see who will fight back and who will fold. Maya walked back to her sculpture, the figure breaking free from thorn-covered chains. She traced one of the thorns with her finger, feeling its sharp edge. What makes you think testifying will make a difference? Because you're the only person who's ever made them back down, Chen said. You're proof that their tactics can be defeated. A jury needs to see that these men aren't invincible, that someone like Maria or David or Rebecca can stand up to them and win. Maya looked at the detective, and if I refuse? Chen shrugged. Then they'll keep doing what they're doing until someone gets seriously hurt, or until they pick the wrong target and wind up dead in an alley somewhere. Maya's head snapped up. Are you suggesting they might escalate to violence? I'm suggesting that people like the Hartwell twins always escalate until something stops them, Chen replied. They've already graduated from verbal harassment to property destruction to bringing armed men to intimidate their victims. What do you think comes next? Maya was quiet for a long moment, then she asked, what exactly would testifying involve? Chen sat back down and reopened her notebook. We need you to describe the harassment campaign, the vandalism, and the attempted break-in. We need you to explain how you made them stop without using violence. And we need you to help the jury understand that victims don't have to be helpless. Maya frowned. I can't reveal details of my military service. You don't have to, Chen assured her. We just need you to demonstrate that the twins' intimidation tactics fail when someone refuses to be intimidated. You can keep the specifics of your background as general as you want. Maya walked to her computer and pulled up local news articles about art community harassment. She had been following the stories Chen mentioned, though she hadn't connected them to the twins until now. Seeing the pattern laid out clearly made her sick to her stomach. How many other victims are there? She asked. That we know of, 8 in the past 2 years. But I suspect there are more who never reported anything, just quietly gave up and disappeared. Maya closed her laptop and looked around her studio. 3 months ago, she had been one of those victims, ready to give up everything she had built to escape the harassment. If she hadn't had skills the twins didn't expect, she might have become another statistic. The young woman, Rebecca, Maya said quietly. Does she know you're here? Chen nodded. She's the one who insisted I contact you. She read about the incident here in some art community forum where people were speculating about how you made the twins disappear. She said if there was someone who could show her how to fight back, she wanted to learn. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. She wants to testify too. She wants to try, but she's terrified. 19 years old, first-generation college student, parents who don't understand the art world. The twins didn't just attack her career, they made her question everything she believed about herself. Maya looked at her phoenix sculpture again, remembering the determination it had taken to rebuild herself after leaving the military. She thought about all the people she had protected during her service, and about all the people the twins would continue to hurt if nothing stopped them. Detective, she said finally, I need to meet Rebecca. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the studio. I was hoping you'd say that. 2 days later, Maya sat in a small cafe downtown waiting for Rebecca Martinez to arrive. Chen had arranged the meeting, but left it up to the 2 women to decide how they wanted to proceed. Maya had chosen a public place that felt safe and non-threatening, remembering how intimidating law enforcement situations could feel to civilians. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes early, clutching a worn portfolio and looking around nervously. Maya recognized the signs of someone who had been targeted. The hypervigilance, the defensive posture, the way she checked exits and watched other customers. The twins had done more than just damage her career. They had taught her to live in fear. Rebecca, Maya stood and extended her hand. I'm Maya Rodriguez. The young woman shook her hand tentatively. Thank you for meeting me. Detective Chen said you might be able to help. Maya gestured to a quiet table by the window. Let's sit down and talk. Would you like some coffee, tea? Rebecca shook her head. I'm too nervous to eat or drink anything. I haven't been sleeping well since all this started. Maya studied the young woman's face, seeing exhaustion and stress that no 19-year-old should have to carry. Tell me what happened. Rebecca opened her portfolio and pulled out several documents, acceptance letters, scholarship notifications, and eventually, the correspondence that had destroyed everything. I got into the City Arts program on a full scholarship. Full ride, studio space, access to professional equipment, internships with local galleries. Everything I had dreamed of since I was 12 years old. Maya looked through the documents, impressed by the young woman's credentials. These are incredible achievements. My parents were so proud, Rebecca continued, her voice breaking slightly. They immigrated here when I was 5, worked multiple jobs so I could take art classes, never understood what I was doing but supported me anyway. When I got the scholarship, it felt like everything we had sacrificed was finally worth it. She pulled out a folder of photographs showing her artwork, paintings that demonstrated remarkable skill and emotional depth for someone so young. The studio space that came with the scholarship was in a building the twins wanted to buy. Not just my space, but the whole building. They were planning to convert it into luxury galleries for established artists. Maya flipped through the photographs, genuinely impressed by Rebecca's talent. "Your work is extraordinary." Rebecca smiled for the first time since sitting down. "Thank you, it means everything to me, or it did anyway." Her expression darkened as she continued her story. "The twins started by offering to buy out my scholarship. When I refused, they began spreading rumors about my work being plagiarized, my character being questionable, my family's immigration status. They made it impossible for me to focus on my studies." Maya felt anger building as Rebecca described months of systematic harassment designed to destroy a young woman's future. What did the school do? Nothing at first. But when gallery owners started canceling exhibitions featuring student work, when donors started asking questions about the quality of students being admitted, when local art critics started writing negative articles about declining standards, Rebecca shrugged helplessly. The scholarship was revoked for academic and ethical concerns. Maya closed the portfolio carefully, and now I work 3 jobs trying to save money for community college. My parents think I failed somehow, that I wasn't good enough for the program. The twins got their building, and I got to learn that talent doesn't matter if you don't have the power to protect it. Maya was quiet for several minutes, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she looked directly at Rebecca. "Detective Chen said you wanted to learn how to fight back." Rebecca nodded eagerly. "I know you made them stop somehow. I know they're afraid of you now. I want to understand how you did it without becoming like them." Maya smiled slightly. "You want to know how to stand up to bullies without becoming a bully yourself." "Exactly. I'm not a violent person. I don't want to hurt anyone. But I can't let them destroy other people the way they destroyed me." Maya studied Rebecca's face, seeing determination beneath the fear and exhaustion. "It's not about violence, Rebecca. It's about understanding power, what it is, how it works, and how to use it responsibly." Rebecca leaned forward. "I don't understand." "The twins have one kind of power," Maya explained. "Money, connections, the ability to make people afraid of consequences, but that's not the only kind of power that exists." Maya gestured around the cafe, where other conversations were taking place at nearby tables. "Look around. Every person here has power, the power to make choices, to stand up for what's right, to refuse to be intimidated. The problem is that most people don't recognize their own power until it's too late." Rebecca followed her gaze. "But how does that help when you're facing someone with money and lawyers and connections?" "Because those things only work if people believe they're more important than what's right," Maya replied. "The twins count on their victims feeling isolated and powerless. But what happens when victims stop feeling isolated?" Rebecca frowned. "I'm not sure what you mean." Maya pulled out her phone and showed Rebecca a news article about community organizing. What if all 8 victims testified together? What if the art community rallied around them instead of being afraid? What if local media started asking why 2 rich kids are being allowed to destroy people's lives? Rebecca's eyes widened. "You think we could get everyone together?" "I think you could," Maya said. "You have something the twins don't expect, people who care about what happens to you. Your parents, your former classmates, artists who have seen your work and know it's genuine. The twins have money, but you have community." Rebecca looked through her portfolio again, stopping at a sketch of a group of people standing together against a dark sky. "I drew this after my scholarship was revoked. I called it Solidarity." Maya studied the sketch, impressed by its emotional power. "That's your answer right there. The twins isolate their victims to make them easier to destroy, but isolation is a choice, not a sentence." Rebecca closed the portfolio and looked directly at Maya. "Will you help us? Will you testify if we can get the others to stand with us?" Maya thought about her peaceful studio, her successful art career, the quiet life she had worked so hard to build. Then she thought about Maria Santos closing her gallery, David Kim working construction instead of making art, and Rebecca Martinez losing her dreams because two spoiled rich men wanted what she had earned. Yes, Maya said finally. I'll testify, but more than that, I'll help you organize. I'll help you understand that you don't have to be a warrior to refuse to be a victim. Rebecca's face lit up with the first real hope Maya had seen since they met. How do we start? Maya smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced since leaving the military, a sense of mission that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with protection. We start by calling Detective Chen and telling her we're ready to build a case that the twins won't be able to buy their way out of. As they left the cafe together, Maya realized that her transformation was far from complete. She had learned to channel her warrior instincts into art, but now she was discovering how to channel them into justice. The twins had awakened something in her that was more dangerous than her military training. They had awakened her sense of responsibility to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And that was a power no amount of money could buy or intimidate. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, artists, and community members on the morning that Connor and Blake Hartwell finally faced justice. Maya stood with Rebecca and the other victims, watching as the twins arrived in an expensive SUV surrounded by their legal team. Even now, months after beginning their fight back, the Hartwell brothers carried themselves with the arrogant confidence of people who had never faced real consequences. They were about to learn what accountability looked like. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of organization, investigation, and coalition building that transformed Maya's quiet artistic life into something resembling a military campaign. But instead of planning operations to neutralize enemies, she had been coordinating with victims, media, and community leaders to expose a pattern of abuse that had gone unchecked for too long. Detective Chen had been right about one thing: the twins were creatures of habit. Once Maya and Rebecca started reaching out to other victims, the pattern became undeniable. 8 confirmed cases of harassment, intimidation, and systematic destruction of people's livelihoods. Dozens more suspected cases where victims had simply disappeared rather than fight back. But the twins had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that their victims would remain isolated, ashamed, and powerless. They hadn't counted on someone like Maya teaching their targets how to organize, how to document evidence, and how to refuse to be intimidated by expensive lawyers and veiled threats. Maya looked at Rebecca, who was reviewing her testimony notes one final time. The transformation in the young woman had been remarkable. The frightened 19-year-old who had clutched her portfolio in a coffee shop had become a confident advocate who spoke at community meetings and organized press conferences. She had not only reclaimed her own power, but had learned to help others find theirs. "You ready for this?" Maya asked quietly. Rebecca nodded, though Maya could see the nervous energy beneath her composed exterior. "I've been ready for 6 months. These people need to know that their actions have consequences." Maria Santos, the elderly gallery owner, joined them on the courthouse steps. At 73, she had become the moral center of their group, her quiet dignity and refusal to be bitter inspiring everyone around her. "My grandmother used to say that bullies only have the power you give them," she said in her accented English. "Today, we take that power back." David Kim approached from the other direction, looking more confident than Maya had seen him since they first met. He had returned to his art while working construction, creating powerful pieces about survival and resilience that were gaining attention in the community. "The reporters want to know if we'll make statements after the verdict," he said. Maya looked around at the group they had assembled. 8 victims who had found their voices, dozens of community supporters, local artists who had donated pieces for a fundraising auction that covered their legal expenses, gallery owners who had provided exhibition space for a show titled Unbroken, Art Beyond Intimidation that drew record crowds. "We'll let our testimony speak for itself," Maya replied. "This isn't about revenge, it's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Detective Chen emerged from the courthouse and walked over to their group. "They're ready for us. Remember, stick to the facts, stay calm, and don't let the defense lawyers rattle you. Everything you've been through has led to this moment." Maya felt the familiar pre-mission calm settling over her as they walked into the courthouse. But this time, instead of preparing for combat, she was preparing to use words, evidence, and the power of truth to achieve victory. It was a different kind of warfare, but no less important than anything she had done in the military. The courtroom was packed. Maya recognized faces from the art community, local media, and what appeared to be other victims who hadn't yet found the courage to come forward. The twins sat at the defendant's table with three expensive lawyers, their expressions suggesting they still believed money would solve this problem. The prosecution had built their case methodically, financial records showing the twins' pattern of targeting specific properties and individuals. Communication records revealing their coordination with harassment campaigns. Testimony from the hired muscle who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges on other matters. But the heart of the case would be the victims themselves. 8 people willing to stand up in court and describe what the Hartwell brothers had done to their lives. Maria Santos testified first, her voice steady as she described months of harassment that forced her to close the gallery that had been her life's work. She showed photographs of the vandalism, read threatening messages that had been left on her answering machine, and calmly explained how the twins had systematically destroyed her reputation in the art community. The defense tried to paint her as a bitter old woman seeking money from wealthy targets, but Maria's dignity and detailed documentation made their attacks look petty and desperate. David Kim testified next, describing how the twins had spread false rumors about his work and character that destroyed his early career momentum. He brought examples of his art, showing the court work that clearly demonstrated original talent, not the plagiarism the twins had accused him of. One by one, the victims told their stories. Each testimony revealed another layer of the twins' systematic approach to destroying people who had something they wanted. The pattern was undeniable, the evidence overwhelming. But Maya knew the real test would come when Rebecca took the stand. As the youngest victim and the one whose case had sparked the current investigation, Rebecca's testimony would be crucial. She was also the most vulnerable to the defense's likely strategy of portraying the victims as opportunistic and vindictive. Rebecca walked to the witness stand with quiet confidence, her artist's eye taking in the room before settling on the jury. Maya had coached her on this moment, explaining that testimony was like any other performance. It required understanding your audience and communicating clearly. "Ms. Martinez," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court about your scholarship to the City Arts program?" Rebecca described her background, her family's sacrifices, and the full scholarship that represented the culmination of years of hard work. She spoke about her dreams of becoming a professional artist and contributing to her community through her work. Then she described how those dreams had been systematically destroyed. "The defendants didn't just want my studio space," Rebecca explained to the jury. "They wanted to send a message to anyone like me that we didn't belong in their world. They wanted to make sure that talent without connections would never be enough." The prosecutor showed Rebecca's artwork to the jury, pieces that clearly demonstrated extraordinary skill and originality. Then he showed the false accusations the twins had spread about plagiarism and character issues. "How did these accusations affect your life?" the prosecutor asked. Rebecca's voice stayed steady, but Maya could see the pain in her eyes as she described losing her scholarship, watching her parents' confusion and disappointment, working 3 jobs while her dreams slipped away. "But you didn't give up," the prosecutor continued. "You're here today, why?" Rebecca looked directly at the twins, her gaze unwavering. "Because I realized that staying silent was just another way of letting them win. I realized that if I didn't stand up for myself, they would do this to someone else, and I couldn't live with that." The defense attorney rose for cross-examination, clearly prepared to attack Rebecca's credibility and motives. "Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that you're seeking monetary damages in this case?" "I'm seeking justice," Rebecca replied simply. "Justice or revenge against people more successful than yourself." Maya felt tension ripple through the courtroom, but Rebecca remained calm. "Mr. Connor and Mr. Blake Hartwell aren't more successful than me. They're just richer. Success in art is about creating something meaningful, touching people's lives, contributing to culture. They've never done any of those things." The defense attorney tried several more angles of attack, but Rebecca had been well prepared. She answered each question directly and honestly, never allowing herself to be drawn into anger or defensiveness. When the defense finished, it was time for Maya's testimony. Maya had debated extensively about how much of her background to reveal. Too little, and the jury might not understand how she had stopped the twins. Too much, and the focus might shift away from the victims to her military service. She had decided to tell just enough truth to explain her actions, while keeping the focus on the twins' behavior. "Ms. Rodriguez," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the harassment campaign directed against you by the defendants?" Maya recounted the weeks of escalating harassment, the vandalism, and the attempted break-in. She showed the court security footage and photographs that documented the twins' actions. "How did this harassment affect your work and life?" Maya described the constant stress, the way the harassment had disrupted her artistic practice, and the fear she had felt for her safety. She spoke about the isolation the twins had tried to create and how it had affected her mental health. "But the harassment stopped suddenly," the prosecutor continued. "Can you tell the court what happened on the night of July 27th? Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for. "I decided to have a conversation with Mr. Connor and Mr. Blake Hartwell about their behavior." "What kind of conversation?" "I explained to them that their actions had consequences, and that I was not the kind of person who would be intimidated by threats or vandalism. I made it clear that continuing to harass me would not end well for them." The defense attorney objected to Maya's characterization, but the judge allowed her to continue. "Did you threaten the defendants?" the prosecutor asked. "I informed them about my background and capabilities, and I suggested that they find a different target for their harassment campaign." "Can you describe that background?" Maya looked at the jury, making eye contact with each member. "I served in the United States Navy for 8 years, including 3 combat deployments. I received training in personal protection, threat assessment, and conflict resolution. I made it clear to the defendants that I had experience dealing with people who try to hurt others." The prosecutor showed the court Maya's military records, carefully edited to remove classified information, but clearly demonstrating her service and decorations. "How did the defendants respond to this information?" Maya almost smiled. "They left that night. They packed up their studio and disappeared, and I never saw them again." The defense attorney's cross-examination of Maya was brief and ineffective. He tried to suggest that she had used illegal intimidation tactics, but Maya's calm demeanor and clear description of simply telling the truth made his accusations seem desperate. "Ms. Rodriguez, didn't you threaten my clients with violence?" "No, sir. I explained my background and suggested they reconsider their behavior. I never threatened anyone with anything." "But you admit you intended to frighten them." Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. "I intended to educate them about the consequences of their actions. If that frightened them, perhaps they should examine their own behavior." The prosecution rested their case after 2 days of testimony from victims and supporting witnesses. The defense spent another day trying to portray the twins as misunderstood young men whose enthusiasm for art had been misinterpreted as harassment. It was a pathetic strategy that fooled no one. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all charges: harassment, intimidation, conspiracy, destruction of property, and attempted breaking and entering. The twins sat in stunned silence as the verdict was read, their expensive lawyers already planning appeals that everyone knew would fail. Judge Patricia Williams took her time with sentencing, clearly wanting to send a message to anyone else who thought wealth and connections made them above the law. "Mr. Connor and Mr. Blake Hartwell," she began, "you have used your privilege and resources to systematically destroy the dreams and livelihoods of talented, hardworking members of our community. You have shown no remorse for your actions and no understanding of the pain you have caused." She sentenced each twin to 18 months in county jail, 5 years of probation, and substantial financial restitution to their victims. More importantly, she issued restraining orders that prevented them from contacting any of their victims or interfering with art-related businesses in the city. But the real victory wasn't the jail sentences or the money. It was the transformation Maya witnessed as the victims left the courthouse together. Rebecca had regained her scholarship and was thriving in the arts program. Maria Santos had reopened her gallery with community support and was featuring more local artists than ever. David Kim had his first solo show scheduled at a prestigious downtown gallery. Each victim had not only recovered from their ordeal, but had emerged stronger and more connected to their community than before. Maya stood on the courthouse steps, watching the group celebrate their victory. Detective Chen approached her with a satisfied smile. "That was beautiful work," Chen said. "You turned 8 isolated victims into a movement that these guys couldn't buy their way out of." Maya shook her head. "I didn't turn them into anything. I just helped them remember what they already were: artists, creators, people with value that had nothing to do with money or connections." Chen looked at the celebrating group. "So what's next for you? Back to the quiet studio life?" Maya looked at Rebecca, who was surrounded by reporters eager to hear her story. The young woman handled their questions with confidence and grace, using the platform to talk about supporting other victims of harassment and building stronger communities in the arts. "I don't think quiet is an option anymore," Maya replied. "Turns out there are a lot of people who could use the kind of help we provided here." Chen raised an eyebrow. "You thinking about making this a regular thing?" Maya thought about her military service, about the people she had protected and the missions she had completed. Then she thought about Maria's closed gallery, David's abandoned dreams, and Rebecca's scholarship that had almost been stolen by 2 men who thought power meant the right to destroy others. "I spent 8 years protecting people from enemies overseas," Maya said finally. "Maybe it's time I started protecting people from enemies right here at home." 3 months later, Maya's art studio had been transformed into something that was part gallery, part community center, and part headquarters for what the local media had dubbed the Artist Protection Project. Her sculptures still filled one corner of the space, but the rest was dedicated to helping artists and small business owners who faced harassment and intimidation. Rebecca had become Maya's unofficial partner in the project, using her experience and natural organizing ability to help other victims find their voices. Maria Santos served as an advisor, and David Kim contributed his legal research skills. Detective Chen stopped by regularly, both to check on cases they were working together and to see Maya's latest artwork. The combination of artist and protector had produced some of Maya's most powerful pieces yet. "You know," Chen said one afternoon as she studied a new sculpture titled Solidarity, "I never thought I'd meet someone who could use military training to make art more powerful instead of less meaningful." Maya looked at the sculpture, which depicted multiple figures supporting each other against a storm. "Maybe that's because we've been thinking about power all wrong. Real power isn't about dominating others or taking what you want. It's about lifting people up, protecting what matters, creating something better than what existed before." She gestured around the studio, where several young artists were working on pieces for an upcoming exhibition about overcoming adversity. "The twins thought power was about making people afraid, but fear is just temporary. What we're building here is permanent." Rebecca approached with a folder of papers and an excited expression. "We just got confirmation on the Milwaukee case. 3 more victims willing to testify, and the local DA wants to use our model for prosecution." Maya smiled. The Artist Protection Project had grown beyond their city, connecting with similar efforts around the country. They were creating a network that would make it much harder for people like the Hartwell twins to operate with impunity. "What about the twins themselves?" Chen asked. "Any word from their lawyers about early release?" Maya shook her head. "They're serving their full sentences, but more importantly, they're not the real problem anymore. The problem was a system that let people like them operate without consequences. We're changing that system." She walked to her workbench and picked up a small tool, examining its edge in the afternoon light. "I used to think my job was to eliminate threats. Now I understand that my job is to eliminate the conditions that create threats in the first place." Rebecca joined them, looking around the bustling studio with satisfaction. "My grandmother always said that the best revenge is a life well lived, but I think she was wrong about one thing." "What's that?" Maya asked. Rebecca smiled. "The best revenge is helping other people live their lives well too." Maya looked at her phoenix sculpture, which now held a place of honor near the entrance to the studio. She had finally understood what the piece was really about. It wasn't just about rising from ashes. It was about using those ashes to help others build something beautiful. The Hartwell twins had tried to destroy her, just like they had tried to destroy Maria and David and Rebecca and all the others. But instead of breaking any of them, they had accidentally created something more powerful than they could have imagined. They had created a community of people who refused to be victims. who understood that real strength came from helping others find their power, and who knew that the best way to protect what you love is to make sure others can love it too. Maya picked up her tools and returned to her workbench, ready to create something new. Outside her window, she could see Rebecca teaching a self-defense class to other young artists, Maria consulting with a small business owner about documenting harassment, and David leading a discussion about building supportive communities in competitive fields. It was beautiful work, the kind that lasted long after the tools were put away and the artists went home. It was the kind of work that changed the world one person at a time, one dream at a time, one act of courage at a time. And it was exactly the kind of mission that a warrior-turned-artist was born to lead. Maya smiled as she began shaping a new piece, one that would tell the story of how 8 isolated victims had become a movement, how fear had transformed into power, and how sometimes the best way to protect your peace was to make sure others could find theirs too. The Hartwell twins had tried to move in on the tattoo-marked girl, thinking she would be an easy target. Instead, they had discovered that some people are marked not by their vulnerability, but by their strength. And that strength, when shared with others, becomes unstoppable. Maya Rodriguez had found her true calling at last. She was still a warrior, still a protector, still someone who stood between threats and the people who needed defending. But now she was all of those things in service of creation instead of destruction, community instead of isolation, and hope instead of fear. And that made all the difference in the world.